I always believed that life, despite its complexity, held an uncanny sense of timing. Growing up in Atlanta, I knew the city inside out. The hidden corners of Piedmont Park, the rush of cars at dusk, and the symphony of cicadas on a humid summer evening. After graduating from Agnes Scott College, I ventured into family law with the conviction that the right advocate could tip the scales toward fairness in an unjust world. The years passed, and the house my late husband and I had invested in became more than a home. It transformed into a sanctuary for my practice and my soul. My office, nestled on the ground floor, faced the sun-dappled streets where stories of love, loss, and hope played out daily. The clients I represented were rarely strangers to hardship. It was in their voices and eyes reflected in shared cups of tea that I recognized both the vulnerability and quiet strength of those navigating shattered promises. That summer, as I wrapped myself in routine, I didn't expect an unexpected ring at the door to shift the rhythm of my days. The cleaners were always thorough, but during the summer, dust would settle again the moment the cleaning stopped. When the doorbell rang, I was wearing an apron and using a turkey baster. Peering through the lace curtains, I saw a young man standing on the porch. I opened the door to let him escape the summer heat. "How can I help you?" I asked. "I'm looking for Sarah Cannon," he said. "I'm Mrs. Sarah," I replied. "What do you need?" "No," he responded. "I'm searching for Sarah Cannon, the attorney." "That would be me, dear," I said. "Please come in. This seems like a good time to introduce myself. My name is Sarah Cannon, and I'm a family law attorney based in Atlanta. Most family law cases today involve divorce. Many attorneys steer clear of this field, finding it unpleasant. But I've seen many good people suffer greatly when a marriage breaks down, not just emotionally, but in other ways too. If I can help a spouse protect their legal and financial interests, I feel I'm making a real difference. Most of the time that spouse is a woman. I've been practicing for quite some time. I won't share exactly how long since a woman isn't obliged to reveal her age, but I will say that I remember watching the Kennedy-Nixon debate on TV, if that gives any indication. Staying in law for as long as I have takes skill, unless you're a wealthy hobbyist. I won't brag, but I'm certainly not a millionaire. My office is on the ground floor of my home, close to Piedmont Park. For those familiar with Atlanta, my late husband and I bought this house years ago, and I've lived here ever since. I appreciate having my workspace at home. It makes the commute easy, which is a blessing in a city like Atlanta with its intense traffic. After clearing things up with the young man at my door, I led him through the French doors into my office and gestured to a couch against the wall. Once he was seated, I asked, "And how should I address you?" He smiled at my formality and replied, "I'm Mr. Stephen Markham." Heading to the mini-fridge built into my closet, I offered, "Mr. Markham, would you care for a glass of sweet iced tea? It's perfect for a hot day, especially with one of these sugar cookies I baked." As he took a glass and a cookie, I studied him. He seemed about 20 years old. I noted that he was left-handed from the way he held his tea and cookie plate in his right hand. His hands were smooth, showing he wasn't involved in manual labor. He was handsome, though not movie star perfect, a bit taller than average, and appeared fit. It's nice to see, as it saddens me how many young people struggle with their weight. His face was gentle, but today he looked very troubled. "So," I said, "what brings you here today?" "It's my wife," he said quietly. "She wants a divorce." "One moment, please," I said. "I think someone else should join us." I stepped into the adjoining room, which used to be the living room. Emily Meerweather looked up from her computer, waiting. "Miss Emily," I said, "I have a potential client in my office. Would you join us?" "Yes, ma'am," she replied promptly. As she stood, I admired again what a lovely young woman she was. Tall and slender, with brown hair held back by a simple ribbon, her sleeveless summer dress highlighted her graceful femininity. I had great respect for Emily. She came from a good family and had recently graduated from Agnes Scott College. I always hired my assistants from my alma mater because they were well-mannered, educated young women. Plus, it was a way to give back to the college for the excellent education it provided me. Emily wasn't a lawyer, but I didn't need one. A family law attorney doesn't typically require a legal assistant, since this field doesn't demand extensive legal research. However, having someone honest, driven, and bright with a kind heart is valuable for other types of research. This is especially true with all the blogs, tweets, social media, and other forms of modern communication. Today, I thought it would be useful for Emily to sit in on this initial meeting. Since she was close in age to our potential client, she might offer a perspective different from mine. At the same time, hearing her take on a client gave me more insight into her. You can tell a lot about someone by how they perceive others. As we returned to my office, I noted approvingly that the young man stood as we entered. Good manners are rare these days, and I appreciate them. Mr. Markham, may I introduce my assistant, Miss Emily Merriweather. Miss Merriweather, this is Stephen Markham seeking our help with a potential divorce. Emily nodded politely. Once we were all seated, I said, Mr. Markham, please tell us your story. The young man launched into a complicated account of his marriage to his beautiful wife, Lola, whom he married just after college, their only child, Anita, whom he adored, and the sudden divorce filing that hit like lightning on a clear day. Shortly after that shock, he added, he was served with a restraining order, barring him from contacting or coming within 200 meters of his wife and daughter until the legal matters were resolved. At first, his story sounded all too familiar. Most of my practice deals with troubled marriages, after all. But my brows furrowed when he mentioned the restraining order, hinting at possible violence. Something that didn't seem to fit this polite young man. Clearly there was more beneath the surface, or at least my aging eyes suspected it. When he finished, I adjusted in my chair and said, Mr. Markham, I should tell you that most of my clients are women. Typically, I represent the party initiating the divorce and ensure they receive what they deserve. I'm not making any judgments about your situation, but this is outside my usual practice. I need some time to decide if I'll take your case. Come back tomorrow at the same time and I'll have an answer for you. I stood, signaling that the meeting was over. He stood too, though his face showed surprise and disappointment. Well, I thought lawyers took any client who approached them, he said. Some do, Mr. Markham, I replied firmly, but I'm not one of those lawyers. Understood. I heard you were the toughest, well, the best divorce attorney in town. So I'll take my chances and come back tomorrow. Thank you for your kind words, Mr. Markham. See you tomorrow. And when you return, I added, be sure to bring a copy of the documents you were served with. If I take your case, I'll need them. He flushed, realizing he should have brought the papers today, shook my hand and said, Have a nice day, Mrs. Cannon. And you too, Miss Merriweather. Then he left. Once he was gone, I turned to Miss Emily, raising my eyebrows. Well, dear, what's your first impression of our visitor? Without missing a beat, she replied, He doesn't strike me as someone who would push his wife to seek a divorce. He seemed kind and very polite. His concern for his daughter appeared genuine. She hesitated and then added, And he's handsome too. At that, she blushed and looked down. I agree he's attractive, I said with a smile. But when a wife suddenly files for divorce, there's usually a significant reason. And when a restraining order is involved, it's not a good sign. So before getting swept away by his looks and charm, I need you to do some online research. Find out what you can about Mr. Markham. I need it this afternoon so we can discuss it and I can decide about representing him. Yes, Mrs. Sarah, Emily said earnestly and hurried to her computer. After she left, I tidied up the tea glasses and leftover cookies. As I cleaned up, I reflected that young Markham was right in one aspect. Most lawyers don't have the luxury of choice. They accept the clients who come their way. Some even have to search for clients like aggressive birds pecking at scraps. The worst, in my opinion, are those who advertise like carnival barkers boasting about a bearded lady. I thought to myself, you're fortunate, Sarah Cannon. You've been doing this long enough and well enough to choose who you represent. And with luck, maybe you can bring a little justice into the world. I silently agreed with my thoughts and returned to my desk. An hour or two later, as I was reviewing another case, there was a soft knock at the door, and Emily peeked inside. Can I come in, Mrs. Sarah? I found some information about Mr. Markham. I gestured for her to enter, and she sat down in front of my desk, adjusting the skirt of her ladylike dress. She had a thick stack of papers she had printed from the internet, and began sorting them neatly according to a diagram she'd drawn. I appreciated the dedication she brought to any task. Wow, I teased. You must be quite impressed with Mr. Markham's looks. You seem very motivated. She ignored my remark and jumped into her findings. Here's what I discovered. He was born in Nashville, but his family moved to Atlanta when he was in elementary school. He graduated from Emory University with a degree in art about 6 years ago, so he's probably only 5 years older than I am. He's an artist and his paintings have been gaining some attention locally. He hasn't made any major sales yet, but after his last exhibit at Centennial Olympic Park, he received positive reviews from a Journal-Constitution critic. He's married, for now, to Lola Markham née Martinez, originally from Miami Beach. They met in college and married right after graduation. They have a daughter, Anita, who's now 3. Emily paused and added, "I saw her picture. She's adorable. No arrests, no complaints, no warrants," Emily continued. "Not even a traffic ticket. Before the restraining order, there was nothing on record." "Excellent," I said. "Now, what can you tell me about Mrs. Markham?" Emily pulled out another set of papers from her pile and showed a page that looked like a biography from a corporate site. "She's the vice president and senior account manager for the Atlanta office of Hamilton Johnson, the largest publicly traded PR firm in the country. She started there as an intern during college, joined full-time after graduation, and has been with them ever since. She currently manages many major clients in the metro area." Emily passed me the paper, and I took a look at Lola's photo, blinking in surprise. Back in my day, someone like Lola Markham would have been called a stunner. Her dark, curly hair fell below her shoulders, framing a striking face. Even in her sharp business suit, her figure was evident. "She's quite beautiful," I remarked. "If that's your type," Emily muttered, sounding unimpressed. "What do you know about her personal life?" I asked. Emily pulled out another set of printouts, which looked like they came from Lola's Facebook page. They listed numerous memberships and activities, along with thumbnails showing Lola at various events, parties, and charity functions. "It's hard to see where her work life ends and her personal life begins. She's always attending something," Emily noted. She paused, then added, "What's interesting is that there are no pictures of Stephen on her page, or even of her daughter." "Let's not jump to conclusions," I said. "It could be a work-related decision or simply a desire to keep her private life separate." "Maybe," Emily said reluctantly. "But if I had a husband as nice and talented as he seems, I'd want to show him off." She blushed and quickly added, "And my daughter, too. You seem a bit taken with this man," I teased. "Just don't let it affect your judgment." Emily looked away, but I continued. "I do agree that Mr. Markham doesn't seem like the type to be unfaithful, and he certainly doesn't strike me as a threat to his wife or child. This tells me there's more to this situation than we know. I think I'll take his case after all." "Oh, I'm so glad, Mrs. Cannon," Emily exclaimed. The next day, Stephen Markham knocked on the door of my old house office once again. "Come in, dear, it's too hot to be outside," I said, welcoming him in. Inside, Emily was already seated, hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked up and greeted him warmly. "Nice to see you again, Mr. Markham." "The pleasure is mine, Miss Merriweather," he said, smiling. I noticed she appreciated that he remembered her name. "Let's begin," I said, sitting at the other end of the couch from Mr. Markham. "As I mentioned yesterday, I typically represent women in these cases, but Emily and I have found enough about your situation that piqued our interest. So, I've decided to represent you, Mr. Markham, if you're still interested." Relief spread across his face as he began to thank me. I quickly cut him off. "Hold your thanks, young man. I haven't done anything yet to deserve it. Save it for when I actually help you." He nodded, understanding but visibly grateful. "Now that I've agreed to represent you," I continued, "I'd like your permission to call you Stephen." He nodded immediately. "Of course." "And you can call me Sarah," I said. "Thank you, Miss Sarah," he replied respectfully. "Now, Stephen, the first thing I need to do is review the documents served to you and the restraining order. I hope you brought them." Stephen promptly took a letter-sized stack of legal papers from the inside pocket of his summer suit and handed them to me. A quick glance told me the divorce papers were a standard template, as if lifted from a law manual. The restraining order was similarly ordinary, so I moved on to the proposal for property division. "Well, well," I said. "It looks like Mrs. Markham wants the house and everything in it, full custody of your daughter and child support. She's aiming for quite a bit." Stephen's face fell into the same expression of sadness and confusion I'd seen yesterday. "If she takes all this, it'll ruin me," he said, voice heavy. "I won't have anywhere to live or paint, and I'll barely see Anita." He lowered his head. "I just don't get why she's become so hostile." I've only ever treated her with love." To my surprise, Emily began to comfort him by patting his hand. Now, Stephen, nothing's decided yet. This is just the opening move. The game is far from over," I reassured him. "But one thing still troubles me, the restraining order. What happened to make your wife seek police protection?" I asked. Stephen's face flushed, this time with anger rather than embarrassment. "That was bizarre." "Pardon me, Miss Sarah." I waved for him to continue. "It was truly strange. I was meeting with Roger Avery, my agent, to discuss some paintings I wanted to sell. While we were talking, a man I'd never seen approached me and asked if I was Stephen Markham. When I confirmed, he handed me some documents and said I'd been served. When I opened them and saw it was a divorce suit from Lola, I was stunned." "Go on," I encouraged him. "Of course. I cut my meeting with Roger short and rushed home to figure out what was going on," Stephen continued. "But when I got there, the door was locked, and my key didn't fit. I started knocking, and I heard Lola inside. She wouldn't open the door, so I had to shout to get her attention. All she said was that I couldn't come in and had to let the court handle it." Stephen looked at us, clearly at a loss. I couldn't believe I was locked out of my own home. Then I thought about Anita, and when I asked Lola where she was, she told me I wouldn't see her until everything was settled. I guess I lost my temper for a moment and started banging on the door, threatening to break it down. Before I knew it, a policeman grabbed my arm and dragged me away. He warned me that if I didn't leave, he'd have to arrest me. I was furious and upset, but I was raised to respect the law, and I definitely didn't want to be arrested. So I left and went to my brother's. The next day, I got served with the restraining order," he concluded. "What did you do next?" I prompted. "I talked to my brother and he said I needed a lawyer fast. When I told him I didn't know any, he said, 'You need the best. The best divorce lawyer in the city is Sarah Cannon. You better go see her right away.'" "I guess I should make a peach cobbler to thank your brother for that glowing recommendation," I said with a smile. Setting the legal papers aside, I looked at Stephen and Emily. "Before we do anything, I need more background information. Emily, take Stephen to your office and gather as much as you can about him, his life, family, friends, and acquaintances." "What exactly are you looking for, Miss Sarah?" Emily asked. "I'm not sure yet. I'll know when I see it," I replied. Emily didn't seem entirely convinced, but I knew she would do her best. I could see how eager she was to help Stephen. "Once you finish that, Stephen, I want you to tell Emily everything you know about Lola. Her job, her hobbies, her friends, everything. Don't worry if you forget something or don't know a detail. Emily is great at finding information online, and together, you'll cover everything. Now get to it. The sooner you work on this, the sooner we can move forward, and the sooner Stephen can see Anita again." They exchanged a determined glance and nodded. "Miss Sarah," Emily said with a shy smile, "we'll get it done." She took Stephen's hand and led him to her office. As the two walked through the French doors, already engaged in conversation, my thoughts went back to when Stephen was served with the divorce papers and the restraining order. One thing was certain. Lola Markham was meticulous. It was clear she had planned everything down to the minute, from serving the papers to securing the locksmith and having a policeman nearby when Stephen came home. She had also arranged for her lawyer to file the restraining order. I reminded myself not to underestimate her. It struck me that Lola didn't actually fear Stephen when she requested that order. Stephen was a gentleman who would never harm a woman, and Lola knew that better than anyone. So why did she need it? The answer seemed simple. She wanted to push Stephen to settle quickly, and taking his daughter from him was her strongest move. "I see what you're doing, Lola," I thought. "You're quite strategic." Another detail caught my attention about the divorce case. Lola had chosen Bolger, Willingham, and Howe, one of Atlanta's largest law firms, to represent her. It was intriguing because Bolger Willingham specialized in corporate law. I doubted they even had a family law specialist. When I checked the legal directory for the attorney who signed the suit, I found it was Harold Jenkins, an associate who had been with the firm only 3 years since law school, focusing on mergers and acquisitions. It seemed they handed her case to a junior associate hoping to make an impression. I guessed Lola had to knock on quite a few doors to get this powerful firm involved. Why? Probably to intimidate Stephen into a quick submission. I smiled. This was going to be interesting. With Jenkins's name and contact information in hand, I called him to set up an initial meeting to discuss the divorce terms. He responded politely, saying his schedule was tight, but that he could meet early next week. "Thank you for your courtesy, young man," I said. "I look forward to our meeting." Over the next few days, Stephen and Emily dedicated themselves to their task. Every time I passed by her office, they were leaning in, discussing something significant. Emily typed questions into her computer while Stephen watched closely, reviewing her findings. Twice, their work continued well into the evening, and they went out for a quick meal before returning to the office for another round of research. "Are you sure you're not writing Stephen's biography?" I teased one day with a smile. "Oh no," she said, blushing, something she seemed to be doing more often. "But you mentioned that every detail could matter, so I'm trying to learn everything I can about him." "You're doing great, dear," I reassured her. "Keep up the good work." On the day of my meeting with Harold Jenkins, I drove to their Peachtree Street office. The firm occupied the top 4 floors of a 35-story building, and the elevator ride felt endless. When I reached the floor, a friendly receptionist greeted me and led me to a large conference room lined with wood and metal, spacious enough for 20 people. The room made me feel small, which I assumed was the point. "Would you like a Coca-Cola, ma'am?" she asked politely. "No, thank you," I replied. "I'll just wait for Mr. Jenkins." I expected Jenkins to make me wait 15 minutes, but he arrived after 10. He seemed a bit anxious. Dressed in a standard gray pinstriped suit, white shirt, and subdued striped tie, he looked every bit the young lawyer. His thinning hair and the strain on his shirt buttons hinted at stress. "Mrs. Cannon," he greeted enthusiastically. "I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you before, but I've heard many good things." "How kind," I said. "It's nice to meet you too, Mr. Jenkins." He took a seat at the head of the table. "Let's see if we can settle the property division so both parties can move on." "Do you mind if I knit?" I asked, placing my bag on my lap. He looked surprised, so I added, "Knitting helps me concentrate." No, go right ahead," he said, a touch of amusement in his voice. I ignored it, pulled out my knitting needles and yarn, and began knitting as he adjusted his posture to regain control. "So, about the division of property, Mrs. Cannon?" he started, but I interrupted. "Yes, regarding that proposal. My client was taken aback by your client's terms. They seem quite one-sided." "Oh no," he said quickly. "We don't think it's unreasonable. For instance, in custody matters, it's common for courts to favor the mother, especially when the child is young and a girl." "Yes, I understand," I replied. "But my client is deeply saddened by the proposed restrictions on seeing his daughter. He misses her dearly and wants to see her far more often than a few weekends and a 2-week vacation each year. And with the current restraining order, he can't see her at all." "Yes, I'm sure this is difficult for him," Jenkins said calmly. "The sooner we reach an agreement, the sooner we can lift the restraining order and reunite him with his daughter." His smile was insincere, and I thought, this will come at a price. "Getting her back is my client's main concern," I agreed. "Good," Jenkins said, as if the custody matter were already settled. "Now let's move on to property division." "All right," I said. "Does my client have to lose not only the house but everything in it?" "Not at all, Mrs. Cannon. He's entitled to his clothes, toiletries, and personal items," Jenkins said with a smile that suggested he was making a significant concession. "We have no problem with that." "But what about the furniture and kitchen items? Does Lola expect Stephen to start over with nothing?" I questioned. Jenkins shook his head with a regretful but firm expression. "Mrs. Markham takes pride in her home. She's invested time and effort to create a space that reflects her taste. And considering their income differences, she provided most of the funds for the furnishings." When I stayed silent, he added, "Under these circumstances, she understandably doesn't want her work." He paused, dismantled in revenge by a hurt husband. "She insists on keeping what she's so carefully built." "Really?" I said. "But she can't lay claim to the paintings in his studio. I don't think she's even displayed his work in the house. Could she at least let him keep his own artwork?" "Remember, Mrs. Cannon, my client funded Mr. Markham's art studio," Jenkins said. He noticed my questioning look and elaborated. "You're familiar with his studio, correct?" I nodded, adding with a hint of irony, "Yes, I graduated from Agnes Scott College, Mr. Jenkins. I know what a studio is," and murmured, "And I know how to say it too." He hurried to continue. "Given the incident where Mr. Markham reportedly became aggressive and had to be restrained by the police, Mrs. Markham is hesitant to concede any property she funded, except as already mentioned. This is interesting, I thought. He expected the question of the ownership of the paintings to come up and had prepared a careful response in advance. Jenkins, sensing an advantage, pressed on. Mrs. Cannon, please make it clear to your client that this entire unfortunate situation can be resolved, and his access to his daughter can be quickly restored if he simply signs the agreement we presented. Prolonging these negotiations will only lead to further delays, and I doubt it will change the outcome. I put my knitting back into my bag and stood up. All right, Mr. Jenkins, I will share your position with my client. I'm confident we can reconvene soon for a final resolution. Good, Mrs. Cannon. The sooner the better. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have another appointment. With that, Mr. Jenkins left, a barely concealed look of triumph on his face. I left the building, making sure to thank the receptionist on my way out. When I returned to my office, Stephen and Emily were waiting eagerly for news, so I invited them in to share what had happened. As I recounted my meeting with Mr. Jenkins, their faces grew somber. I feel like the whole meeting was pointless, Emily sighed. On the contrary, my dear, it was quite productive, I corrected her. I discovered 3 things today that might be very valuable to us. Really, Miss Sarah? Stephen asked, looking puzzled. What did you learn? First, I confirmed that your wife is using your daughter to pressure you into making a quick decision on her terms. Mr. Jenkins all but spelled out that this is their strategy, I explained. Stephen's expression darkened. Second, I found that your wife isn't just intent on keeping everything in the house. She's particularly focused on your paintings, I continued. But why would she care about those? Stephen burst out. They aren't even worth that much, and she hasn't shown interest in my work for ages. That's a very good question, Stephen, I replied. I'd like to know the answer to that myself. Emily chimed in. You mentioned 3 things, Mrs. Sarah. What was the third? I realized that Mr. Harold Jenkins is neither particularly skilled as a lawyer nor much of a gentleman, I said, crossing my arms and standing tall. I may need to ask for forgiveness for some of the thoughts I had about him today. I smiled at them both and said, Now that I've shared what I learned from Mr. Jenkins, would you like to share what you found out about Mr. Markham and his wife? Emily hurried to grab her growing stack of notes and printouts, and they settled side by side on the sofa to report their findings. After a brief exchange, Emily started with an overview of Stephen's background and family. Stephen then jumped in to tell how he and Lola met and got married. As they spoke, it amused me to see how they often finished each other's sentences, eager to showcase their discoveries. Good job, I praised them. Did you find out anything more about Mrs. Markham? Their tone shifted as they recounted Lola's life and career. It was clear neither of them enjoyed talking about her, but their opinions couldn't overshadow the impressive facts. At college, Lola had been active in service organizations, served as sorority president, and graduated in the top 10% of her class. At Hamilton Johnson, she had advanced from an entry-level assistant to vice president and senior account manager, faster than most employees figured out basic office navigation. Even Emily admitted, albeit reluctantly, that Lola was more than just a pretty face. She must be really skilled to climb the ladder that fast, and the number of high-profile accounts she handles is remarkable. Do you know who they are? I asked. Yes, Emily said, checking her notes before listing an impressive lineup of major Atlanta companies and institutions. Hold on, I interrupted. Did you say Avery International Art? Is that Roger Avery's company, your agent, Stephen? That's correct, Stephen said. Lola was the one who introduced me to Roger. It was an honor to work with such a well-known agent. And here's something else, Mrs. Sarah, Emily added. Lola also handles PR for Bolger, Willingham, and Howe. What a small world, I said, though inwardly I thought it seemed improper for a law firm to use a PR agency. As they continued discussing their findings, my mind wandered as I pieced together everything I had learned. I had several potential theories, but no solid conclusions. If we were to move forward, I would need some outside assistance. The young pair seemed ready to continue their presentation well into the evening, so I interrupted again. Sorry to interrupt, but I think it's time for me to reach out to an old friend. I need to do this before it gets too late, so why don't you two wrap up for today, and we'll pick this up again tomorrow. After they left my office, I began rummaging through my desk drawers. Where did I put that church directory? When Emily and Stephen came into my office the next morning, they were surprised to see me speaking with an older African-American man they hadn't met before. I quickly stood to introduce them. "Mr. Rayford, this is my assistant, Miss Emily Merriweather," I said. She nodded politely, though a bit unsure. "And this is Mr. Stephen Markham, the client I mentioned." "Hello, hello," Mr. Rayford greeted them warmly. "Emily, Stephen, meet Mr. Lucius Rayford. He's the gentleman who cleans my office." Emily and Stephen tried to hide their surprise, but it was clear they felt embarrassed. "Lucius and his wife Mabel are dear friends of mine," I explained. "We attend the same church, and he's agreed to lend us a hand." I turned to Mr. Rayford, taking his arm. "Thank you so much, Lucius. It's reassuring to know we can rely on you." "Oh, Mrs. Sarah, you know I'd do anything for you," he replied. "I'll be in touch as soon as I can." He nodded to Emily and Stephen, saying, "Nice to meet you," before heading out the door. "Please send my best to Mrs. Rayford," I called after him. "I will," he promised as he left. Emily turned to me hesitantly. "Mrs. Sarah, how is Mr. Rayford going to help us?" I smiled. "Lucius has been a friend for a long time, and you'd be amazed at what he can do. But for now, we need to be patient. We're entering the waiting phase." "What exactly are we waiting for?" Emily asked, looking unsure. "I'm not completely sure," I admitted with a smile. "But I'll recognize it when I see it. In the meantime, I want you to keep digging into your research. Look for anything you might have missed or any new connections." "I enjoy working with Emily," Stephen said, glancing at her. "But I'm really worried about Anita. When will I get to see her again?" "All in the Lord's time," I replied. As it turned out, the answer came just 3 weeks later. That afternoon, Mr. Rayford returned with a large envelope, and I had just finished reviewing its contents when Emily and Stephen came into my office. "Well, well," I said, my tone disapproving. "I didn't expect to find something like this, especially so soon." "It's quite something, isn't it?" Lucius agreed. I leaned over, gave Lucius a hug, and kissed his cheek. "Thank you so much, dear. You've been an enormous help. We need to have you and Mabel over for dinner soon." "That sounds wonderful, Mrs. Sarah," he said. "We're looking forward to it." Once he left, I turned to Emily and Stephen with a smile. "I think we're nearly ready for the final phase." Just then, my phone rang. I saw the number on the display and signaled for Emily and Stephen to stay. "Yes, this is Mrs. Cannon. I'm happy to wait for Mr. Jenkins," I said. A minute passed, then another. "Hello, Mr. Jenkins. Nice to hear from you again. Yes, I've had the chance to discuss your client's proposal with Mr. Markham. I think we're at a point where we can reach a mutually agreeable resolution. How about we meet at your office as soon as possible for all parties? This has gone on too long, and my client is eager to see his daughter." "Yes, tomorrow at 3 p.m. works perfectly," I said, raising my eyebrows to confirm with Emily and Stephen. "Excellent. I look forward to seeing you then." I turned to Emily and Stephen. "As Caesar said, the die is cast. Now, before our meeting, do you have any new information that might impact our case?" They exchanged uncertain looks. Their fidgeting reminded me of schoolchildren eager to please but unsure of the right answer. Emily finally spoke up. "Mrs. Sarah, we've spent countless hours going over everything, but all we found was one small coincidence that didn't seem significant." "What is it?" I asked. She hesitated before saying, "We realize that Bolger, Willingham, and Howe and Hamilton Johnson are in the same building, but we didn't think it was important." I smiled. "That's all right, dear. You and Stephen did excellent work. In fact, Mr. Rayford also pointed out that same coincidence." Emily stayed silent, but Stephen spoke up. "Why does that matter, Mrs. Sarah?" "It just means it was easier for Lola to visit her lawyer." "You're right, Stephen, but there are too many coincidences in this case. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's late, and I have a lot of preparation to do before tomorrow. You two should get some dinner. See you in the morning so we can head to Peachtree Street together." I wasn't exaggerating when I said I had a lot of work to do. I stayed at it late into the night and continued the next morning, ensuring everything was perfect. Though tired, I felt accomplished and ready to put an end to this drawn-out process. The three of us walked to Bolger, Willingham, and Howe's offices in silence. The sweltering heat outside and the nerves inside kept us from chatting. We were shown into the same imposing conference room as before, and this time we waited for 20 minutes. He must be feeling confident today, I thought. Mr. Jenkins finally made his entrance, offering an insincere apology for his delay. "I'm sorry for keeping you waiting," he began. "I was on a long international call." "No need to apologize, Mr. Jenkins," I said with a slight smile. "We all understand how important you are." Jenkins lifted his head slightly, likely wondering if I was being polite or sarcastic. Just then, there was a soft knock at the door, and he opened it to let in a young woman. "Mrs. Cannon," Jenkins said in a showy manner, "I don't believe you've had the pleasure of meeting Lola Martinez Markham." I felt Stephen tense beside me at the sight of his estranged wife. He won't take long to move past her, I thought. Leaning over, I shook her hand. "Hello, Mrs. Markham. It's unfortunate that we're meeting under these circumstances." She had that polished look many young women strive for these days, which I never found particularly appealing. She returned my greeting with a tight smile and sat down, crossing her legs in a way that made her short skirt ride up, showing too much thigh. Her partially unbuttoned shirt showcased her ample cleavage, clearly chosen to remind Stephen of what he had lost. She wanted to wound him, I noted. After introducing Stephen and Emily, Jenkins, aiming to take control as before, looked at me with a patronizing smile. "I see you brought your bag again, Mrs. Cannon. Are you planning to knit?" I smiled back. "No, I have other plans for it today." Jenkins spread his hands theatrically. "Let's start by reviewing my client's proposal." "Actually," I interjected, "we should begin by reviewing our counter-proposal." Jenkins looked stunned but quickly recovered. "Of course, Mrs. Cannon. Ladies first. We weren't aware you had a counter-proposal. Let's hear it." Lola shot him a displeased look, clearly not in agreement. Ignoring their exchange, I began. "Regarding the house Mr. and Mrs. Markham shared, we propose that Mrs. Markham vacate it immediately, relinquishing her claim to it in favor of Mr. Markham." "What?" Lola shouted, turning to Jenkins. "She can't do this!" Jenkins placed his hand over hers to calm her and turned to me indignantly. "Mrs. Cannon, what makes you think Mrs. Markham would agree to such an outrageous demand?" I focused on Lola. "Mrs. Markham, you're an impressive young woman. In just 3 years, you've built a career that others work decades for. You clearly have the looks, intelligence, and skill to achieve this." Despite her irritation, I could see she was taking in my praise. Little daffodil, I thought. "However," I continued, "it's hard to imagine anyone achieving so much so quickly without relying on certain other talents." I pulled a photo from my bag and handed it to her face down. When she turned it over, her expression turned to shock. "Where did you get this?" she demanded. Jenkins grabbed the photo, his eyes widening as he realized what he was looking at. The black and white image depicted an explicit scene involving Mrs. Markham. Stephen and Emily gasped when I handed them copies, and Emily leaned in to quietly calm Stephen. Jenkins, lacking such restraint, blurted out, "Who is this?" "This," I said, "is Mr. Warren Lewisone, managing director of the Atlanta branch of Hamilton Johnson. He is, I assume, your boss, Mrs. Markham." Jenkins looked stunned as I added, "It seems your client hasn't been completely honest about her reasons for seeking a divorce." Lola began to argue, but Jenkins shot her a stern look, regaining control. "While this photo may depict an office relationship, it's not relevant to the matter at hand. Georgia is a no-fault divorce state, meaning the court won't consider infidelity. Any affair would be irrelevant," Jenkins stated, regaining his confidence. "Furthermore, it's impossible to prove when this occurred. It could have happened after Mrs. Markham decided to end her marriage, making it ex post facto." "That's true, Mr. Jenkins," I agreed. "But if you and Mrs. Markham take a closer look at the setting, you'll see this took place in Hamilton Johnson's office in this very building. If the relationship became known to the company's directors and shareholders, they might not react well. It would violate the company's code of ethics, which forbids relationships between managers and subordinates, and they might question the real reason behind Mrs. Markham's swift rise to the top." As the weight of my words sank in for Jenkins and Lola, I offered them an option. "However, I don't see any reason for anyone else to view this photo or dwell on its implications. That is, if we can agree to our proposal regarding the Markham house." Jenkins and Lola immediately began whispering to each other. Though I couldn't make out the words, their tense exchange was clear. I glanced at Stephen and Emily. Emily, still visibly shocked by the photo, had managed to compose herself and was now trying to calm Stephen. From her cold glare across the table, it was obvious she wouldn't be sending Lola a friend request anytime soon. Stephen's expression was a mix of pain and anger, a combination I'd seen on many clients' faces before. I cleared my throat loudly to cut through Jenkins and Lola's conversation. "Moving on to our second counterproposal," I said. "This pertains to custody of Anita. We propose that full custody be granted to Stephen Markham, with Lola receiving only limited visitation, subject to the father's discretion." Both Lola and Jenkins were visibly shocked, and Jenkins quickly spoke up. "Mrs. Cannon, that's preposterous. No court would grant sole custody to the father unless the mother were incarcerated. This is absurd." "Interesting that you'd mention that, Mr. Jenkins," I replied smoothly. "Perhaps you'd be kind enough to look at this document." I handed out copies of a letter printed on the letterhead of a major New York art dealer addressed to Roger Avery. The letter was an offer to buy several of Stephen's paintings for a significant sum. Jenkins looked confused. "I don't see how this is relevant to today's discussion." Before I could respond, Stephen spoke up, unable to hold back. "This letter is dated over a month ago. Avery never mentioned it to me. I didn't know there was any deal to sell my paintings." "Exactly, Stephen," I said. "You didn't know, but I suspect Mr. Avery may have shared this information with your wife." Lola avoided my eyes, so I pressed on. "I wondered why she was so insistent on keeping your paintings, especially when she never showed interest in them before. This letter provides an explanation." Jenkins tried to regain control. "This is outrageous," he said. "You're making baseless accusations. There's no proof that my client knew about this letter. There's no evidence of fraud. For all we know, Avery misplaced or forgot the offer. Besides, Avery wouldn't benefit from any conspiracy. He'd earn his commission regardless of ownership." "I thought the same, Mr. Jenkins," I replied, "until I saw this." I passed around another set of photos. Silence fell over the room as everyone took in the images of Lola's recent romantic encounter. "That's Roger Avery," Stephen whispered, confirming what everyone else suspected. I waited for the shock to pass before speaking again. Turning to Lola, I said, "Conspiracy to defraud is a criminal offense. If I bring this letter and these photos to the authorities, they won't hesitate to press charges." "No!" Lola screamed. "You can't prove it! You can't do this to me!" I gave her a subtle smile. "It just so happens that I'm having dinner with the State Attorney General next week, an old friend of mine. Would you like me to bring this to his attention?" Jenkins, looking desperate, snapped at Lola. "Stop talking. You're only making this worse." When she fell silent, I seized the moment. "My client doesn't want his daughter to live with the shame of having a convicted parent. If we agree on our proposed custody terms, with full child support from Lola, we can avoid the investigation, trial, and likely conviction." I looked directly at Jenkins. "Wouldn't you agree that the court would be more inclined to grant the father's custody request if he has the mother's written consent?" Jenkins, avoiding eye contact with anyone, muttered in defeat. "That would be acceptable, Mrs. Cannon." "Well, now that we've settled on our counterproposals, there's just one final matter," I said cheerfully. "Oh, what now?" Jenkins groaned. I frowned at his choice of words, but continued. "The last issue is the bill for the time my firm has spent on this case. Given the circumstances that led my client to seek legal counsel, we believe it's only fair that Bolger, Willingham, and Howe cover the full cost." I handed Jenkins a copy of the invoice. His face turned pale as he reviewed it. "The hourly rate you're charging is higher than our senior partners," he started, then paused as the realization dawned on him. "Wait, you're asking my client to pay, right? You mentioned Bolger, Willingham, and Howe would pay. That wasn't a mistake." "I know what I said, young man, and I meant it. I expect the law firm of Bolger, Willingham, and Howe to cover this bill in full," I stated firmly. "That's unbelievable," Jenkins argued. "Law firms don't pay the fees of other attorneys. My boss would throw me out if I handed him this bill." "Not if you give it to him along with this," I said, pulling the last photo from my bag. Jenkins stared at it, looking as if he might have a heart attack. "This is Robert Willingham, our managing partner," he said, stunned. "Exactly," I replied innocently. "It appears he had a similar relationship with Mrs. Markham as Roger Avery did. As a member of the Georgia State Bar Association Ethics Committee, I'm well aware that engaging in such relationships with a client can be grounds for disbarment," I said sweetly. "So I suggest you present this bill and the photo to Robert and have him handle it right away." With that, the three of us stood to leave. Lola sat at the table, crying, refusing to look at Stephen as we passed. Stephen, avoiding her gaze as well, had a subtle smile as we walked by. Jenkins sat slumped in his chair, staring at the wall, likely wondering if his legal career was over. Before stepping out, I turned back to Jenkins. "One piece of advice, Mr. Jenkins." He looked up, defeated. "Next time you invite a lady to a meeting, don't keep her waiting." I didn't bring up the day's events until we were safely back in my office after navigating the hectic Atlanta streets. Then, the celebration began. Stephen and Emily were overjoyed, dancing together, while I handed out glasses of sweet tea. Emily, barely able to contain her excitement, said, "Oh, Stephen, did you see Lola's face when Mrs. Sarah showed her those photos?" "But how did you even get those photos?" Stephen asked. "We have Lucius Rayford to thank for that." They looked at me, puzzled. "You see," I explained, "Lucius owns one of the largest cleaning companies in Atlanta. His firm services the building that houses Bolger, Willingham, and Hamilton Johnson. I asked him to place a few discrete cameras in specific offices and report back with any findings." "But Roger Avery's office isn't on Peachtree Street," Stephen noted. "How did you get the photo of Lola with him?" "Lucius may not run the only cleaning company in Atlanta, but he's friends with the owners of most. He had no trouble asking the team handling Avery's office for a favor." "How did you know Lola was involved with all these men?" Emily asked, surprised. "I didn't know, but I had my suspicions when you pointed out her rapid rise at Hamilton Johnson. They recruit top graduates, and I know one from Agnes Scott who went through their program. But out of so many talented people, only Lola had such a quick ascent. It made me wonder why." "But what led you to Roger Avery?" Stephen asked. "I wouldn't have thought of it until Emily mentioned that he was Lola's client. It might have been a coincidence, but it seemed odd when you said you were served papers at his office. How would a process server know exactly where to find you unless Avery told Lola? And why was she so adamant about keeping your paintings when they weren't known to be valuable?" I put these pieces together and asked Lucius to have his friend check Avery's office for correspondence with your name. That's when I requested the camera installation. "What about the senior partner at Jenkins's firm?" Emily asked. "Oh, Robert Willingham?" That was straightforward. Hiring Bolger, Willingham for a divorce is like using a sledgehammer to squash a fly. Overkill and extremely costly. How could Lola afford such a firm on her salary? And even though she worked in PR for them, corporate firms like that don't take divorce cases under normal circumstances. So I dug for unusual connections and found them. I smiled. "Still," Emily pressed, "Lola started her plan before Stephen came to your office. That means it was already set before Lucius installed the cameras. How did you know she would continue with these men?" "Oh, that," I said. "I was betting on human nature." "I don't get it," Emily said. "It's simple. A schemer rarely stops once they've set a plan in motion. They always go one step further to secure their success. In this case, she repeated her actions with Warren, Roger, and Robert. And as for men," I said with a glint in my eye, "once they've had a taste of honey, they always want more." Emily blushed at the silence that followed. I looked at Stephen, seeing a mix of emotions on his face. He was still elated from our victory, but there was a hint of sadness. I tried to guess why. "Don't feel too bad about Lola, Stephen. I'm sure she loved you when you married. But someone like her loves herself more than any man. Once she realized she could manipulate people for her gain, I'm sure she considered trading you for a wealthier option." "I think you're right, Mrs. Sarah," he said with a sigh. "When I married Lola, she seemed perfect. Now that I see her true nature, I'm just glad she's out of my life. But it still hurts." "Of course it does, honey," I said. "But you're better off without her. Now you just need to find a woman who will love you for who you are." Before he could respond, I added, "But aren't you forgetting something?" "What do you mean? Don't you have a little girl waiting at home? I'm sure she's eager to see her dad," I said with a smile. His face lit up. "You're right. It all happened so fast I almost forgot." He started to leave, then turned to Emily and asked, "Would you like to come with me and meet Anita?" Emily's eyes softened. "Yes, I'd really like that." They headed for the door together, and as they walked to the car, I noticed they were holding hands. Back at my desk, I made a note on my calendar for the next morning. Call the Dean of Students at Agnes Scott. Better start preparing. I have a feeling I'll need a new assistant soon. The summer sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, golden beams across the room as I sat back in my chair and watched them walk away. The gentle rustle of leaves outside mixed with the faint laughter of children playing somewhere down the street. My mind drifted as I thought about the twists and turns of this case, the calculated risks, the surprises, and ultimately the triumph that restored a father's hope. I glanced around my office, familiar yet different in the warm evening light. The framed certificates, photos of clients turned friends, and small mementos from decades of practice seemed to reflect back at me with a quiet satisfaction. This was why I'd chosen this path. Not for accolades or financial gain, but for moments like these. Moments when justice was not just a word, but a tangible victory. With a sigh, I picked up the phone, the habit ingrained in me after all these years. I dialed a number and waited for the soft, familiar voice on the other end. "Mabel, it's Sarah. You tell that husband of yours he's earned himself a dinner of fried chicken and peach cobbler. Saturday night good for you both?" The laughter that came from Mabel was like a balm, rich and warm. "Oh, Sarah, you spoil us. We'll be there with bells on." I set the receiver down, a smile pulling at my lips as I thought of Lucius's diligent work and the quiet ways he'd helped me, not just this time, but over the years. Outside, the streetlights flickered to life, casting their glow on the familiar paths of Piedmont Park. Life went on, sometimes in a complicated tangle, but tonight it felt like a symphony in perfect harmony. The city I'd grown to love, with all its flaws and triumphs, embraced the stories it held, the stories of love, betrayal, resilience, and yes, justice. And as for young Emily and Stephen, well, their story was just beginning, and I, Sarah Cannon, would watch with the same hope and affection I had for all my protégés who crossed the threshold of my life. After all, there was something about the quiet strength in beginnings, especially the unexpected ones, that always made this old heart believe in the magic of second chances. With a final sip of my sweet tea, I made another note in my planner. This one was simple. The next case will come. Be ready. And I would be.